All right, so let's talk about group by statements. Group by statements are extremely powerful, but you also got to be very cautious. Okay, let's first talk about how it works, and then I'll go a little bit more about what to be careful on. Okay, so imagine I run this query. I'm using the world database schema. I'm getting from the countries table the name, continent, population, and life expectancy, and I order by the continent in the ascending order. And this is how the results looks like, and it's cool, right? It's neat. So, but what if I want to create some summary records? So I don't want to display every single country in Antarctica or South America. What if I wanted to create some, again, summary records such as how many countries there are for each continent, what the total population is, what the average population is, what the maximum population or life expectancy is, or the average value is. A lot of times I want to create those aggregate values and create summary record, right? Imagine you're pulling a sales data. You want to find out how much revenue did we make each month? How many new customers did you get each month of the year, right? You want to create summary records and display beautiful graphs and charts to display that summary record. You don't want to spit out millions of records. You want to summarize it into either months or some aggregate values. So in that case is when you use a group by. So for example, what if I wanted to get some stats for each continent? Instead of having bunch of records for all these continents, what if I just wanted to have one record for each continent? In other words, I wanted to combine information for multiple records that have the same continent and create some summary record, or create a single summary record with some information about the multiple records that were combined. In that case is when you use group by. So in this, for example, I can say group all the records that have the same continent. Okay, so group multiple records that have the same continent. And then here, for example, okay, display the count name. And then count how many records were combined for that specific continent, right? That's how you need to read count star. Count star means how many records were combined to create that summary record, okay? In this case, for that specific continent. So let's just do this, okay? And if you run this, you'll find that, okay, South America, 14 records were combined. Meaning, what does that mean? The number of records that were combined, that basically means the total countries. So I could also say, instead of count star, to say this is total countries. If it is like a sales record, maybe the total count number of records that were combined will mean you had 18 sales, right? So anyway, count star basically just means the number of records that were combined for that summary record. And I have an extra comma there that could be removed. So now instead of count star, it shows total countries here, which is good. Okay, you can also do other things such as get the sum of the population. All the records that were combined, get the sum and display that too. So there it is. And maybe instead of sum population, I want that field to just be total pop. And I can run this. And it says total pop or population. And then you can maybe get the average value of life expectancy. Now, when it comes to the aggregate function, just like as I mentioned before, different databases have different aggregate functions, and you can spend so much time. For us, we'll just really try to focus on the ones that are available across all the different databases, because I guarantee most likely, you will have the opportunity to switch from one database to another, and you don't want to use one that's only specific for that database type. So anyway, you can do that. I think the average, I don't think that's the right name, but let's just run it. Yeah, the response gave some error. You have an error in your syntax. Sometimes, this GUI is so weird how it doesn't display the full response. So sometimes I just have to click, copy the response, paste it here, and then I can scroll and kind of read, oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, that was the most important information, yet it was cut off, right? So it didn't understand what average was. I think it's actually AVG on MySQL. And then this is how it goes, right? So isn't that beautiful? Now I can have multiple columns. So if I wanted to group all the records that have a unique continent name and a unique another field, I can also put that here. But for now, you can just get familiar with grouping all the records that have the same one field. But you can also add multiple things here in the group by statement. Below the video, I included some links that you can read. Go in and read it. Don't spend too much time. So I put a time cap for reading each of the article, but just make sure that you don't get confused on what count star means. That just means combine the number of records, count the number of records that were combined for that summary record, for that unique record that has a unique continent name in this case. So that's important to know. There is also included an article about halving. So that's something new. Go in and read about it. I don't use it too much, but sometimes when you're using group by statement, you may want to use halving. Sometimes it's I would say it's probably it's on the borderline, a must to know and a nice to know, right? So I put it there so you can reference it. Now, word of caution, whenever you're doing group by, sometimes I see rookie developers just put group by statement and they just assume that it grouped all the records right. Well, don't make that assumption. What I would recommend is always just put the query without the direct group by and do some manual check. For example, when we ran some of the previous query, for example, okay, where we just displayed, so I'm just going back to the previous query by doing Command Z. Okay, when we did this, notice how I usually just display the full thing, and then I look at the records and say, okay, Antarctica, there are 5 records. So once I do a group by, it should say 5. Population, it seems like, at least according to my database, is 0 all the way through, so the total population should be 0, right? So you're basically pulling some random data or some select data, and you say, okay, once I do the group by, right? Once I do the group by, it better show 5 for Antarctica and 0 as total population. In this case, it did, right? So a lot of developers, I think sometimes they just do a group by, and they, especially when this query gets really, really complex, they just automatically assume that whatever result was done correctly. But there, I guarantee you may have had some small errors in your SQL statement. Your result may be off. Do not completely trust the SQL results. Validate it, just like what I have done, right? Get some sample data, and I know this should be 5 and 0. It was, so most likely these other information are probably correct too. So anyway, I'll put below the video some additional information you can read about the art of self-checking. You got to self-check, especially when you do a lot of group by statements and your queries get more complex. Again, don't just assume you got the right results. Good developers will go the extra mile and validate some sample data and make sure that, hey, this group by data are legitimate. I checked on Europe and I counted, and there were actually 46 records. Hey, I actually, exported that result into an Excel and I summed it up, and it came out to be, 482,993,000, whatever, right? It's always good to do that spot check when you're doing group by.